Alright, so further down the line in this video, the detective is asking him to recount some of the story, and they're going through the events. They're talking about this person named Lauren who was supposed to meet up with Shanann that day because they were both pregnant and they were going to relax, talk, hang out, anything like that. And let's go ahead and take a listen to this section here.
How do you know?
That was the first I heard of it because she said that they were supposed to meet up that day.
Oh, when she came over at 8,
Yeah.
she said, hold together, something like that?
Yeah, like that. When she heard about everything on Facebook and then being missing, and she's like, yeah, her and I were supposed to, Lauren said her and I were supposed to meet up and do a little pregnancy pal thing.
Lauren pregnant?
Yes.
Okay. First kid?
Third.
Okay. And so, both third kids. So they were just going to meet up because they're expecting mothers.
Yeah, they're probably just going to just hang out
Yeah.
and probably see each other in a while.
Okay.
I ain't worried about her though.
Okay.
So the captions were actually wrong here. Let's go ahead and replay this.
Yeah, they're probably just going to just hang out
Yeah.
and probably see each other in a while.
Okay.
I ain't worried about her.
I am worried about her. He actually says, I ain't worried about her though.
Okay. Who are you worried about?
So then the detective says, what are you worried about? Listen to his response.
Anybody that I know right now, like, if they have not told me anything, it drives me nuts. It's driving me nuts because, like, there's no way, like, the people that I know that have kids that could have helped her, if she's at somebody's house right now, like, they would have had to say something. But with all this going on, there's no way they could have kept their mouth shut by now.
What are you worried about?
So when the detective asks, who are you worried about? Instead of saying my wife and kids, he says the people that could be hiding from me. So once he says that, the detective again says, so who are you worried about? Listen to his second response.
Honestly, like, I can't really say, like, if I'm worried about anybody right now as far as...
Honestly, I can't really say if I'm worried about anybody right now. Why aren't you worried about your wife and kids? So obviously, the detective picked up on this and was like, he's not saying he's worried about his wife and kids. I asked him twice. He's not saying anything about being worried about where his wife and kids are. So obviously for the detective, that had to have struck that something weird is going on here. Chris is still on the topic of friends, like if there's anything the friends are hiding from him. That's not what the detective is talking about here. The detective wants to know if he's worried about his wife and kids, yet Chris is still on the topic of the friends. So then he goes and asks Chris one more time. He says, okay, so who are you worried about? He's waiting for Chris to say, I'm worried about my wife and kids. Let's listen to this response.
I have to be somebody I don't know, honestly. The only thing that I can think of is somebody I don't know.
Okay.
He keeps repeating what he's saying. He keeps saying, I don't know. I don't know who I'm worried about because I don't know if any of my friends or her friends are hiding anything. That's not what the officer is asking, Chris. Come on, man. You're supposed to be, like, so narcissistic that you think you can outsmart the police, but honey, you're so goddamn dumb that it's not working. You don't see the question that the detective is trying to ask you. You're still stuck on the fact that he's thinking about the friends. He's not asking who you're worried about in the friend department. He's asking if you're worried about the wife and kids, which you're obviously not. So real fast, answering the questions, you can kind of see Chris is starting to get a little bit nervous. The detective is asking like minor details. Who's this? Who's that? When were they here? Were these people gone when this person showed up? And let's watch that again when he responds to all of this.
Pretty well. Oh, just up.
The knee is shaking.
Okay. Was she the one watching the kids the night before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's all I remember.
Talking about the babysitter.
How did that go with Dave and Jeremy?
Oh, good. They're just, just there just to show support, just, chilling in the kitchen.
Just two of them?
Yeah, then that's me. Yeah, me and them.
Yeah.
So he started over his words a little bit.
Everybody else is gone by them.
Okay.
Knee starts shaking. He takes a deep breath. Because he knows he made a little mistake. He stuttered over his words there. He said, yeah, me and them and me. We were all there. So he's stuttering over his words at this point because it's already an hour into the interview. His brain is already starting to get a little bit tired from trying to cover up everything he's done so far. I would assume it gets very exhausting, like mentally exhausting, to keep a story straight when it's not the truth. At this point, he's already starting to show signs of letting his guard down and not being able to cover up his story the way that he thinks he would have been because he's narcissistic and he's like, oh yeah, I can outsmart the police. Yet an hour in, he's already getting mentally exhausted from all the questions and the explaining and trying to keep the story straight while not looking suspicious. That's a lot on the brain there. And it can start to be seen an hour in with the knees shaking and the big breath once he starts making those mistakes. Alright, so moving right along, after getting some more information that he needs, he starts to step back and says, alright, can we talk about something that might be a little bit difficult? Let's go ahead and watch this section here.
Can we talk about something that's kind of hard to talk about?
So he switches up.
So when I work investigations like this, I have to keep an open mind on everything. Okay. And part of keeping an open mind is listening to you talk about your wife and your marriage. And the day she goes missing is the day that you guys have marital discord. Okay. So you can understand what I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Makes me sick to my stomach, honestly. Like, I know, I've talked to a few of my friends, like, you know, this does not look good on you. I'm like, I know. It's like, if people knew that we were having marital issues, they're gonna look at me, especially with the way everything looks. And it honestly just makes me sick to my stomach, because this is something that I would never do. Ever.
Alright, so the detective says, keeping everything in mind, when I work these cases, I have to look at all the options here. So since the day they have marital issues is the day that Shanann goes missing, obviously that already looks really bad on Chris's part. So the detective's trying to keep in mind that Chris could be a suspect here. Throughout this hour-long interview so far, he had to make sure he was listening to the way that Chris talks about his wife and kids. He had to see if there's any sort of disconnect, any sort of hatred, any sort of anything out of the ordinary that could be a reason why Chris is a suspect. He says, now this is the way I have to look at you. He says, how does that make you feel? Chris says, it makes me sick to my stomach. Says that his friends told him, like, this doesn't look good for you. And he says, I know, and it makes me sick to my stomach. It doesn't make him sick to his stomach because of what he did. It's because of what everybody thinks he did. So it's all about the image for him. It's not exactly what he did. It's just how people think of him. And that's why he's sick to his stomach. And then he goes to say, it makes me sick to my stomach because this is something that I would never do. He pauses, all while staring at the detective saying this, and then says, ever. So this is a little bit of overexertion on this sentence because he says, this is something that I would never do, ever. So he's trying to convince not only himself, but also the detective that there's no way he's involved.
I know, like, you have to look at every point. This is something I would never do to my kids or my wife at all.
Look at the silence here.
I'm not sure, like...
Look at that! The detective is just sitting, like, twiddling his thumbs. He's like, yeah, I don't believe a word you're saying, dog. And that's what I love about that, because the detective is letting Chris revel in the fact of what he did. He's like, alright, if I just sit here and be quiet, let's see if he'll continue to dig himself further into this hole. So we had a few seconds of silence after Chris says that this is something I would never ever do to my family. And once Chris is stuck in that silence, he's like, I gotta say something, because he's not buying it. Listen to this.
I'm not sure, like,
Look at how intently they stare at each other, because the detective is analyzing him and Chris is maintaining that eye contact to see if the detective is believing him. Once he realizes that the silence is not going to be broken by the detective, he feels the need to fill the silence and say something else.
to make people believe that, just because if they knew we were having marital discord, they would automatically look at me. But I would harm anybody in my family at all.
Further silence.
I know we were having marital discord.
And Chris just keeps going. Honey, stop. Oh my god, I probably shouldn't find this funny, but it's like, dear God, you're just digging yourself further and further in, because this detective knows exactly what he's doing here. He knows exactly how to keep Chris talking, and the more Chris talks, the more the detective suspects.
We have no idea where she is, or the kids. I promise you that has nothing to do with any of that.
He stutters. I have nothing to do with that. It's not only himself, but the detective. Further silence. Listen to this.
Very telling the truth.
He said, "Are you telling me the truth?"
Why should I believe you?
Because I'm a very trustworthy person, and the people that do know me, they know how I'm a calm person. I am not an argumentative person. I am a person who is never going to be abusive or physical in any kind of relationship. I would never harm my kid or my wife. You can talk to any of my friends, any of her friends. They know me.
So he's trying to present this image of himself that he is not an abusive person, he's not a confrontational person, he's not going to argue with anybody. By trying to maintain and keep up this image, he's trying to say, look, I am not a confrontational person. I would never lay a hand on my wife or kids. But the detective is just not buying it.
They know I'm a low-key guy that's quiet. I'm not about confrontation. I'm not about anything that elevates to that level. I mean, like, if someone yells at me, screams at me, I just take it, and I just try to get it by the wayside and get it back to where it's just a cool conversation. None of that gets to that height, because I am not that. I've never been that person.
Okay. You can imagine it's my job. Okay. And I told you that tonight, we would talk about things. And when I offend you, right? You know that we have to get to the bottom of this. So you know that. Yeah. Okay. Would you take a polygraph?
Sure.
Okay. Would you take it tonight?
If that's what you want me to do. I've never done one. I don't know what it involves, but
You know what it is?
from what I've seen, it goes on your finger.
You know what the purpose of one is?
That's for a lie detector test.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we do this? Let's take a little break. I'm going to come back in here.
So he mentions, would you take a polygraph test? We have to get to the bottom of this. Chris says, sure. He says, would you do it tonight? Chris says, if that's what you want me to do. So this conversation is actually really important, because not only does the detective bring up the polygraph test, which might actually spike Chris's heart, which would show up in the polygraph test, but obviously he's not wearing it, so we don't really know. He mentions, would you do it tonight? So if Chris had nothing to do with anything and wanted to find his wife and kids, he would have said, Yes, I will do it tonight. I don't care. I want to find them. I want to know where they are. Not if that's what you want me to do. Do you understand the difference there? If Chris actually wanted to find his wife and kids as soon as possible, he would have been all over that and said, yes, I want to find them. I want to know where they are. I will take this polygraph so you can move away from me and actually find what happened to them. But since he says, if that's what you want me to do, it doesn't look like he's concerned about finding his wife and kids, which again is a negative strike that the detective picks up on against Chris. So instead of saying, all right, we're doing it tonight, he says, let's take a little break. Because obviously after an hour of interrogation, quote unquote, mainly an interview that is made to look like an interview and not an interrogation, it's going to be exhausting. But if you are truly not involved, you truly want to know where your family is, what happened, and get to the bottom of everything, your adrenaline is pumping through because you're so worried and you would not be able to sleep, you would not be able to rest, you would not be able to do anything until you found them because you love them. You would take the polygraph test so that the police can get closer to what actually happened. Now, since Chris is involved, he says, if that's what you want me to do, so he's doing it not for himself and for his family, he's doing it for the police to move on from him, which is not something someone would say if they weren't involved.
I have a lot more questions for you, okay? I want to remind you that tonight is voluntary, okay? I can't keep you in here, I won't keep you in here. If you want to get right up and walk out of here, you can do that, okay? All right. Do you want to keep talking?
I mean, I can. I mean, if that's what you want, I can keep talking.
So the detective again offers, this is not an interrogation. You are not in custody. We do not have any legally bounding things against you. So you can get up and you can leave if you want. But Chris says, if you want to keep talking, I will keep talking. Which again, he's doing for the detective and not for his family. So again, another red flag, another red flag, another red flag. It's not looking good for Chris. The detective is already suspicious. It's just digging him further into that suspicious hole. So I think I'm gonna leave this episode here. If you did watch and enjoy this episode of Psych Reacts to Chris Watts's interviews, be sure to drop a like down below. Hit that subscribe button. I do these quite often, once a week, and I also do gaming videos as well if you're interested in that. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and again, please be nice in the comments. If people are being rude, be sure to dislike their comment, just so we can keep a nice community here where we can talk about these things and not get offensive, rude, or any kind of hate. So again, if you see any hate, be sure to dislike it so that we can keep a nice community that can talk about things like this. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I will see you tomorrow. Peace!